I think the most obvious question in many people's minds, Glenn, is how did an American come to be in New Zealand and become so interested in our art scene?
Well, I began collecting Los Angeles abstract painters, largely from the Ferris Gallery in the 1960s. My longtime friend and mentor, and that was Ed Moses. The LA abstractionists became known to the world by a very famous 1959 traveling show called the LA Abstract Classicists. Well, they weren't classicists. They were all in their 30s. One of those classicists, one of his paintings around here somewhere, Carl Benjamin.
Right, behind you.
Yeah, taught 6th grade in my hometown. My mother went to college with him.
So that's very personal.
His narrative, and I'm his deepest collector, me and Dennis Hopper were the deepest collectors of Benjamin. Benjamin claims that he learned to paint by using crayons because he taught 6th grade. And 1 hour a week they had the art program. And his rule was, pick your colors, no houses, no horses. And that's where he learned to paint. Fact is, my mother said he never talked about anything else when they were in college. He was going to be a world famous painter, and he became one. So why New Zealand? If you were in LA in the 50s and 60s, you were out of touch. You had to live in New York. From here to there to over here, a few blocks. If you were Kenny Price and you were a surfer, you didn't move. If you were Bob Irwin and you were a cruiser who learned to paint by shellacking cars, if you were Judy Chicago and you actually went to car painting school, you didn't go to New York. If you were James Turrell and you went to car painting school, you didn't go to New York. Today, I would say the history books from looking at art from that period will valorize those art makers as being the forefront of minimalism, conceptualism, and lyrical abstraction. Here, there was a school I was unaware of that I dove straight into called the Lultich School of the 70s. Merkisich, Thornley, Don Driver, Roy Good. 5, 6, 7 artists who are the vocabulary of abstraction in this country, who had to meet like in a cafe after hours so that they wouldn't be found out for violating all the rules of how you make pretty pictures. You know, what was going on, what we'll call vintage LA, Ferris Gallery, late 50s to late 60s, and what was going on here in the 70s, which became a mature art form, internationalist art form. So that's how I started pairing, you know, what's happening in LA, what's West Coast, what's here.
What fascinates me about your collection, and I imagine this is only part of it, is that it takes time to put together a collection like this, and you're a busy guy. But you have obviously dedicated a real section of your life to building this collection.
I never used an advisor.
No?
So I went and met the artists, almost without exception. If they were living, I knew them. Milan Merkisich, I've had tea with him 4 or 5 times at his house. He's a great recluse. I've lured him out of his house, which is a feat. And I said to Milan Merkisich, still living.
Yes.
One day I said, you know, if you'd moved to New York in 1960, you would have gone down in history as one of the great colorists. He said, I didn't want to move to New York City in 1960, and I'm a pretty good colorist and down here.
It's hard to ignore the fact that you've got, as well as a lot of very contemporary New Zealand art, a couple of New Zealand greats represented here in the collection.
Well, you were warned away, I was. You know, everything McCann, nothing but McCann, McCann all the time. When you begin to study his work, you see that he was doing something that wasn't being done somewhere else at the same time. Very antithetical to what the going gold standard of painting was in this country at the time. And he painted words before anybody else, including Jasper Johns. So McCann, as a force and factor from Australasia, is one of the top 10 painters of the 20th century.
Obviously, one of the great privileges for us in working with this collection is being exposed to the likes of a Fred Sandback, and there aren't too many of those in this country. What drove you to bring a Fred Sandback to New
That's
Zealand?
just, well, you know, when I sort of graduated from LA abstraction into minimalism, minimalism is the strongest voice in American art making. You can't get more minimal than Fred.
No.
4 pieces of string. It's the most expensive thing I paid for. And as it wasn't the cause of it, my ex-wife put it, I guess you've got all minimal now.
Was it difficult for you at all to justify that? How do you rationalize that in your head when you're making a purchase like that?
Well, there's art money, and then there's money for everything else in life.
I look at the big Stephen Banbury there, which is such a wonderful example, and I wonder how you came to own a piece like
I
that.
visited Stephen in his studio one day, and he was pouring that painting on the floor. I didn't recognize at the time how many panels I committed to. So you got to have a fairly large wall, but you can break it up and make a trail around the house.
You can?
Sure. I'm not sure Steve would, Steve was going to recommend that, but I've done it. But I mean, I got a lot of memories here. That's Sarah Hughes coming out of grad school over there. John Nixon painted that at my house at Mahana. Winston Roth, he made those pieces here in New Zealand at my apartment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, at the house. Don Driver had a show up at the Suter, and I bought that piece out of that show. So I met Don, and then I bought Yellow Cross straight from Yellow Cross from Don. Noel Ivanoff and I have been to a couple suppers together. So almost without exception, if they're living and they're on this wall, I got to know them. And, in art collecting, do you dare know the artist? My view is, I learn about the artist first from the work, and I've never been surprised by finding someone whose personality didn't feel like the work, usually positively.
So, what's next for you, Glenn? We hope that you'll still continue your deep interest in New Zealand art.
Oh, that'll continue to happen. Look, it's a very vibrant culture here. It's known for its nature, but the ingenuity of the population, I don't think has a match anywhere else. I would say that I don't know of more creativity per capita anywhere else in the world. And so I don't think that's going to change.
No, could you talk to us for a moment about your thoughts on philanthropy, because it's a reasonably new phenomenon in New Zealand, unlike America, I think. And at the moment we're seeing the growth of the need for philanthropy in New Zealand.
Truthfully, you were a socialist economy for a very long time. The government paid for these things. There's been a pullback from, state being involved with those institutions. And so that's where the private sector has to step up. It's going to be a change for the better. It gets you people who are actually activists, who care about the particular space, and they want to participate. I mean, art collecting is that. As an art collector, you are an activist for the betterment of visual arts. Otherwise, you're just a passive spectator. There's, room for both, but, you got to, we always said in Las Vegas, everybody's a better until you look down and see who actually put money on the table.